tell you one time, go grab your guns. I'll tell you one time, this day belongs to us. Why?
Hello. Good evening. And welcome to the War Room, which I have recently discovered by name was copied by Steve Bannon. Some of you may may actually recognize that name. And I don't know how I feel about that because he was under scrutiny, wasn't he? And he lost his job, as did his boss. And now he has a new job, which I guess I should start off with by saying, wow, what a week I have gone through. I have lived 3 lives in a week, 3 lifetimes in a week. And frankly, I'm pretty goddamn tired. I'm so tired, as a matter of fact, that I just realized that my splash screen's a little bit off. So, my apologies for that. Let me see if I can fix that in real time. Because the border's a little bit off. There we go. Okay, it's going to overlap just a hair. Anyway. Yeah, what a week. Usually, I have been doing this bi-weekly now. Or bi-monthly. Bi-monthly. I've been doing this bi-monthly now. And it was because the stories have been a bit slow. Because the winter had ground things to a halt. And there just wasn't a lot of stories to share. And yet, every time we came back, 2 hours plus. And I know I always tell you, I'm going to try to get you out of here in an hour. Never happens. Sorry. But a lot of things have happened to me in the last week, and almost none of them were good. Like, they've all been bad. I still have most of my health. I still have my job. I still have my dogs. And now I have 3 puppies. 3. I have 1 male and 2 females. I have lots of dogs. They will all be available for adoption in 6 to 7 weeks. If you're in the Texas area, Southeast Texas, Houston-ish, and you want one, let me know. I'll hook you up. I got 3 puppies. I'm raising them right now. I've had drama, a lot of drama. I'm pretty tired, pretty sore, pretty wore out. I am kind of frustrated right now because an hour before kickoff, all my panelists were in the server, and now they're all not here. Makes me wonder if I should keep doing this or not. I was recently encouraged by my mentor to look at a new source of news and media because he, as I, also am sick of the way that the media is being run in our country. However, there have been alternatives. Some of you may follow Truth Social. Some of you may go to TikTok. Some of you may know of a channel called Real America's Voice. That is what was suggested to me. I have watched it, and honestly, I'm still. The jury is out on how I feel about Real America's Voice. Because the first thing I saw when I turned it on a couple of days ago was a journalist who had been fired from another source of media I watch for sexual misconduct of his coworkers. Never proven, never convicted, both cases thrown out, but they fired him anyway. Me. Um, he was there, and I watched it for an hour, and I thought, wow, what a bunch of feel-good twaddle. Give me something I can use. There was nothing. He was followed by Steve Bannon, who hosts a show called The War Room, lawsuit pending. And it reminded me of, I watched him for an hour, and it reminded me of a former fellow Gun Channels member that I used to watch, who I thought was a bit old, a bit gray, a bit try-hardy, and sort of bored me to tears with the idea that he was using jargon to try to sound young and hip and relevant. And I thought, you don't have to do that if your content is good. That is what Steve Bannon did. And I thought, not feeling that either. So far, my alternative media source, not really feeling it. I was told that it gets better over time, but some of us just don't have time for that. I'm meandering. I know. I'm sorry, because I thought a couple of my panelists would trickle in by now, and they haven't. So I have a moment of reflection that I'm going to need to make. Today is day 415 of the conflict in Ukraine. What I heard Steve Bannon tell me yesterday sort of made me spit my coffee across the room. Because as many of you who have watched this show for a while have heard me say, is take the news with a grain of salt. The victors will give you an escalated number. The loser will give you a reduced number. And somewhere in the middle is the truth. Well, in this case, the UK Defense Ministry gave me the high number for the numbers you see scrolling across the bottom of your screen. Steve Bannon gave me the lowest number I have ever heard. So I threw out both. The numbers you see before you are based on an average. And after 415 days of siege warfare, I tend to believe that these numbers are feasible. I'm not going to say that they're accurate. I'm going to say that they're feasible, because even the source I use says to be confirmed, but it's based on the reports. So I will go with this, because at least they have the decency of saying still needs to be confirmed. Okay? And this is based on the averages. I play on the law of averages because that's how sociology works, although I am a psychology major. In other news, I am not special, but I did go Magnum yesterday. Some of you will know what that means. And no, it wasn't 38. And I'm not 38, and I'm not 35, or 357, whatever. I'm the other one. And I don't care. Like, a long time ago, I had a goal that I meant to reach by yesterday. And I will be the first to admit, I didn't reach it. I didn't even come close. And I had never planned my life past yesterday. Really, truly. Like, I thought of everything up to that point, and today is real life plus one, and I don't know what to do with it. And today was just a mess. It just was. I went to work, and it was just crap. I came home, and it was just crap. I'm here, and it's okay, but everything's just bleh. Anyway, um, I guess since I don't have comment, or I don't have, no, that's next year, or no, that's 2 years from now. Finest of apes. That's 2 years from now. I'm 44, and I don't look it. I definitely feel it. Anyway, today is day 415. As some of you probably read in the update, the theme of today is the FBI is publicly recruiting traitors from within for spy operations against Russia. Leaks, which I'm sure many of you have already heard to the point of projectile vomit. Pentagon leaks from a 21-year-old Air Force reservist and what they uncovered that includes Russia nearly, and what they uncovered, which includes Russia nearly shooting down British spy planes, Ukraine's very dire anti-aircraft situation, and how we may or may not be spying against the Koreans, both the North and the South. Also in the news, Egypt has shown the world its true colors by sending lethal aid in the form of 40,000 rockets to Russia, at least until they were exposed. European nations such as Denmark are now pressured to answer the timetable on advanced warplane deliveries. That's a really good story, by the way, which we will get to. Russia's unemployment figures actually skyrocketed past ours. And because they're running away in droves, Russia plans to implement a digital draft. Because you can't run from your social media account. A new boys' club was established. We'll get into details on that. And do you remember the original deal that the U.S. had to send Polish MiG-29s to Ukraine? There was a whole backfill theme behind that. Yeah. Germany finally greenlit that. The numbers are shocking, though. And last but not least, the leaks confirm that U.S. Special Forces are indeed in Ukraine. And if my other panelists show up, we'll discuss Phase 4 of the war game scenario. However, if they don't, this is going to be a very short show, because I won't waste your time with the war game if it's just me, and I will have to think very hard about if I'm going to do any more of these. So this could be the last episode of the War Room, because if nobody wants me to do it, I'm not going to waste your time. Anyway, I'm going to skip the description of the war game because nobody's here for it. So we're just going to act like it's not happening yet. I didn't post the details of it in the description of the video, so if nobody's here for it, maybe I'll save it until next week, though it won't mean as much or matter as much. Because the whole point of my war game scenarios was for us, the panelists, to postulate out loud. Just take educated guesses and say what we think about what's currently going on leading up to this point and what we think is going to happen next. And it's not the gospel. We just thought that we would put it out there, and then a day, a week, a month, a year from now, if it happened, we could go back on this episode and go, man, that guy was really ahead of the curve. Like, you outthought everything else and preemptively decided this or figured this out. Like, ego stroke, right? Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start with the stories. If my panelists decide they want to show up, I'll go ahead and bring them in. Otherwise, today will just be the stories, and I'll let you go early because if they don't want to be here, you probably don't want to be here. So we're going to start with Friday, April 7th, 1 week ago today, day 408. And it starts off with this, which clearly I got the scaling wrong. Let me move this over here. There we go. All right. So, the FBI has turned to social media to help it ramp up its Russian recruitment and intelligence gathering as the war in Ukraine continues to rage with no end in sight. No end in sight. It's a move receiving mixed reviews from Russian experts. In a video posted to Facebook and Twitter, scenes from the U.S. Capitol and the Russian embassy are displayed as a voice speaking in Russian tells the listener that the FBI can change their future if they can provide the U.S. with intelligence. The narrator says that the FBI is looking for spies, expats, and anyone with information on countering the Kremlin. Do you want to change your future? Alan Kohler from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division questions while speaking in English directly to the camera. The FBI values you. The FBI can help you, but only you have the power to take the first step. Sidebar: they are literally asking you to commit treason within your own borders. The FBI appears to have launched its social media program in February in an attempt to encourage Russians to turn away from the Kremlin and Russian President Vladimir Putin's aggression after more than a year of war in Ukraine and heightened geopolitical tensions in the West. That's right. The same organization who has made a hash and mockery of the Justice Department in this country is now trying to influence everyday citizens of Russia to become traitors. And they try to say, "We will protect you, bro." In the middle of them trying to rebuild the tatters of their own reputation. Just a thought. Former CIA Moscow station chief Dan Hoffman was quoted as saying that the social media message was sharp and smart, adding that it may help the FBI and the country prevail against Russian aggression. But, and you're going to recognize this name, former DIA intel officer for Russian doctrine and strategy, Rebecca Koffler, who is also a native Russian speaker, says that the video itself was flawed and said that the narrator's commentary did not always make literal sense, which she argued undermines the FBI's credibility. Koffler also questioned how the FBI will be able to devote the resources it will need to properly vet all the callers it will now likely receive. Because obviously you're going to be trolled. The FBI is operationalizing this new method for several reasons. First, it is extremely difficult to recruit Russian assets, she explains. Russia is a super hard environment because its counterintelligence services are one of the most effective and brutal in the world. The FBI is reacting to the modern time. When young people are constantly on social media, it's trying to cast a wide net and get a bigger bang for its buck, attracting more potential candidates to spy for the U.S. But the former DIA intelligence officer's faith in the government is effectively employing such a program. Faith in the government is effectively employing such a program was low. I wish them luck, but my confidence level in this program being successful is next to nothing. The FBI's Washington field office has encouraged anyone who has confidential information related to Russian intelligence or defense matters to come forward. The Bureau's Intelligence Division has also sought to ensure those who are considering coming forward that they will not only be listened to, but also assisted to ensure their safety and confidentiality. Right, because we did so well with Brittany Griner and the journalist who's currently in prison. We did so good with that the FBI says that they will ensure their safety and confidentiality. Sorry, not buying it. Moving forward, though, we'll move on to Sunday, day 410. And I want to show you this. A British spy plane flying over Ukraine was nearly shot down by a Russian fighter jet, according to a leaked Pentagon document circulating the social medias. The surveillance plane was flying off the Crimean coast on September 29th. Such spy planes are usually used to collect electronic messages, such as radio communications. According to the document, it was nearly taken down by a missile shot by a Russian Sukhoi Su-27 fighter jet. Shooting down the British plane would have had been momentous enough to bring the U.S. and its NATO allies into the Russo-Ukrainian war. I think that's bullshit, but whatever, that's me. The Washington Post investigated the document and found a reference to, quote, a near shoot-down of a UK RJ. RJ refers to the RC-135 reconnaissance airplanes, also known as rivet joints. That is what you're seeing there on your screen. UK Defense Minister Ben Wallace informed the British Parliament about the confrontation in October, saying that the two Russian fighter jets intercepted the RC-135 and flew quite recklessly. While Wallace added that a Russian jet released a missile at the time, he did not disclose that the confrontation was nearly a shoot-down. Wallace chalked up the missile launch to a technical malfunction. The U.S. Department of Defense referred the leak to the Department of Justice this week. The Department of Defense is actively reviewing the matter and has made a formal referral to the Department of Justice for investigation, Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh had said on Friday. The cause of the leak, which includes troves of documents, is unknown. An advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the leak may have been orchestrated by Russians to push misinformation, as some analysts have speculated that the documents were slightly doctored in favor of Russia. The published data are related exclusively to the information and operational game that the Russians started in order to introduce confusion, seize the initiative, and discredit the very idea of offensive. It's obvious, Podolyakin said. Moving on. We are now at Monday, April 10th, day 411. And I'll give you this. The leaked U.S. Pentagon documents paint a grim picture of Ukraine's air defense outlook, predicting that the country could run out of key assets before the end of May. Ukraine's S-300, those air defense systems, could run out of ammunition as early as May 2nd, while the country's other air defenses could be depleted by around May 23rd. The documents dated to late February state that the systems like the S-300 make up some 89% of Ukraine's air defense capabilities. Should Ukraine lose its ability to threaten Russian aircraft encroaching on its territory, the conflict could quickly turn. Currently, Russia maintains a fleet of about 485 fighter jets, compared to Ukraine's 85. Should air defense systems go offline, Ukraine's lopsided numbers game in the air would be its only means of securing the sky over Ukrainian troops. Close air support. The Pentagon said on Sunday that an interagency task force is assessing the validity and impacts of the sensitive and highly classified material that is leaked online. The leaked documents pertain to a wide range of issues and countries, detailing one instance in which a British spy plane was nearly shot down by a Russian jet off the coast of Crimea last year. UK Defense Minister Ben Wallace previously told the British Parliament that the Russian jets flew recklessly, but chalked the missile launch up to a technical malfunction. Just as a sidebar, some of these stories will intermingle, so if you think you just heard that a few minutes before, you probably did. The leaks also suggested that that Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, had secretly encouraged the mass protests against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last month. It is alleged that Mossad advocated for Mossad officials and Israeli citizens to protest the new Israeli government's proposed judicial reforms, including several explicit calls to action that decreed the Israeli government, according to the signals intelligence. Netanyahu's office, which is in charge of the Mossad, dismissed the claims. The report that was published overnight in the American press is mendacious and without any foundation whatsoever. The Mossad and its senior officials did not and do not encourage any agency personnel to join the demonstrations against the government, political demonstrations, or any political activity, the Prime Minister's office wrote on behalf of the Mossad. Moving on. This is actually easy when I do it by myself, because I don't have to wait for answers. I should probably take the time to go ahead and say good evening to the chat. Shady Hill, the finest of apes, Bjorn, and Terry Scher. If any one of you catches this on the replay, because I know that there are other shows that sort of happen at the same time, good evening to you as well. Moving on, you're going to see this guy's face a couple of times tonight because a lot of it has to do with his squirming like a worm, trying to cover his boss's ass. Hang on. What happened? There we go. Don't know what happened there. I think my shift key got stuck or something. All right. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby warned against sharing leaked documents while still refusing to confirm their authenticity. Highly classified materials were reportedly leaked that contained intelligence on China, Israel's intelligence agency Mossad, and the progress of the war in Ukraine. Some reported discrepancies among the documents, such as lower estimates for Russian troop deaths, have been publicly released, have led to skepticism about the material's actual authenticity, but Kirby still cautioned against sharing the documents. Alright, so just to give you an idea what's going on, the UK Ministry of Defense, okay, this is not the people who are on the ground in Ukraine. Their estimates of Russian casualties skyrocket just north of 220,000. That's a lot of people. Now, we've been in this war for 415 days. You take 220,000 divided by 415, you're going to get a number. Steve Bannon on Real America's Voice, he'd come up with a number yesterday of only 16,000 in 415 days. The reason I don't buy that statistic is, number one, it's way too low, and number two, the Russian government themselves, one weekend, couple of war room episodes ago, had admitted that they lost 5,800 troops in a single weekend. So 16,000 in 415 days? That don't jive. Not when you lose 5,800 in a weekend. At least when the enemy is confirming that, right? Like, that makes sense. Anyway. Again, without confirming the validity of the documents, this is information that has no business in the public domain, he told the press on the Monday morning briefing. It has no business, if you don't mind me saying, on the front pages of newspapers or on television. It is not intended for public consumption, and it should not be out there. Doesn't that sound like a guy who's really trying to squirm away from this? An advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Mikhailo Podolyak, accused Russian operatives of doctoring and leaking the documents to undermine U.S. support for the Ukrainian war effort. The fictitious document that ended up on the net most likely serves to discredit counteroffensive ideas and should provoke an increase in distrust between Ukraine and its partners or within Ukraine. That's Podolyak's quote. I ain't buying it. Moving on. We are now at Tuesday, April 11th, day 412. This is going really quickly, actually. And I'm going to bring up the country I came from because for most of you aren't aware of this, but I am actually an import model. Me, Pwnery, is an American import model. And what's kind of funny about that is where I was born still makes me a naturalized U.S. citizen. So if you ever want to make me president of the United States, you can. If you don't like Donald J. Trump, and if you don't like Ron DeSantis, and you thought President Pwnery would be a good idea, you could make that a reality. Because I am a naturalized U.S. citizen, despite the fact that I was born here, in that picture. So, Tuesday, April 11th, day 412. The office of South Korea's president is saying Tuesday that a purported leaked Pentagon document suggesting the U.S. may be spying on the country is untrue and altered, reports say. The response comes as the U.S. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer requested an all-senators classified briefing on the leaked Pentagon documents. The document provides details of internal discussions among South Korean officials about a deal to sell artillery shells to the U.S. to help replenish its stockpiles, according to Reuters. The officials reportedly were concerned that the U.S. ultimately would divert the weaponry to Ukraine, violating a South Korean law prohibiting the country from supplying weapons to others currently engaged in war. That the U.S. was able to capture the conversations suggests that it could be spying on South Korea, according to Reuters. But the office of South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol reportedly said Tuesday that the document is untrue and altered, and suspicions his office is being spied upon are utterly false. Yoon's office also said U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin held talks with his South Korean counterpart Tuesday, in which both sides agreed that most of the document was probably fabricated, but did not elaborate on what specific parts. Yoon is scheduled to meet with President Biden in Washington, D.C. on April 26th. That's 12 days from now. The suspicions that the U.S. could be spying on South Korea has prompted criticism from the country's opposition Democratic Party. If it is true that they have spied on us, it is a very disappointing act that undermines the South Korea and U.S. alliance, which is based on mutual trust. Lee Jae-myung, the party's leader, was quoted by the New York Times as saying. Lee reportedly added that if the U.S. is spying, it should apologize to the South Korean people. Chris Meagher, an assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, said Monday that, quote, "We are not going to get into the validity of the purported documents posted online, but the Pentagon team continues to review and assess the veracity of the photographed documents that are circulating on social media sites and that appear in some cases to contain sensitive and highly classified material. These photos appear to show documents similar in format to those used to provide daily updates to our senior leaders on Ukraine and Russia-related operations, as well as other intelligence updates. Some of these images appear to have been altered," Meagher added. When asked Tuesday about the South Korean documents, the Department of Defense said it had, quote, "no further comment on the leaked documents." Kim Tae-hyo, South Korea's Deputy National Security Advisor, said Tuesday that the U.S. is the country with the world's best intelligence capabilities, since Yoon's inauguration and have shared intelligence in almost every sector. Other purported leaked U.S. Pentagon documents paint a grim picture on Ukraine's air defense outlook, predicting that the country could run out of key assets before the end of May. One details an instance in which a British spy plane was nearly shot down by a Russian jet off the coast of Crimea last year. Sorry, I'm really tongue-tied tonight. The leaks also suggested that Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, had secretly encouraged the mass protests against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last month. The Prime Minister's office has denied such reports. So you're going to see a lot of overlap here. You're going to see a lot of denial. You're going to see a lot of that's doctored up. But they're all cautiously defensive about this, aren't they? Like, what do you believe? I believe that we probably do stick our nose in everyone's business, and we probably dabble in their secrets. Somebody got caught with their hand in the cookie jar this week. Now everyone's backpedaling. So hard that you're probably going to want to wear a helmet. Moving on, though, because this is the next part that seems to be a bit disturbing. Here. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi hatched a plan with his top aides to produce and ship up to 40,000 rockets to Russia, which has depleted its supply of ammunition during the 13-month invasion of Ukraine, according to leaked U.S. intelligence documents obtained by the Washington Post. Let me just take a quick sidebar here. We discussed on the Discord server about all the different parts of this leak and how we thought, wow, where have I heard this before? Oh, that's right. In the movie with Matt Damon called The Green Zone. And at the very end of the movie, he took all his classified information that he had uncovered and he emailed every major news agency in the world to expose all of it. But this guy, this spy, this 21-year-old Air Force intelligence officer reservist had access to all this. And did he share everything with the world? No, he didn't. He posted it on a Discord server with a bunch of squeakers who idolized him as a god because he had intelligence info. Now, truth be told, I'm going to reserve judgment on this guy because he is a person of religious background. He is a person who believes that we are being lied to, which most of us would probably agree. He's also a person who believes that Washington is screwing with the American people by withholding certain information from them, and that we should all be vigilant and well armed. I have no problem with any of that. As long as you keep it within the confines of sanity and the law, fine. But he didn't do that, did he? No. He posted it to show off to a bunch of younger people who thought, oh my god, this guy's 21, he's older than us, and he has all this stuff, he's so cool. Why would we doubt this? He should have emailed it to everybody. That's all I'm saying. If he did that, his credibility would be far greater. National Security spokesman John Kirby declined to confirm the validity of the documents Monday, but warned the media that the material is not for public consumption. No, don't look at that. You're not supposed to see that. That's not for you. That's the kind of shit we write here between ourselves. We don't need to put the public into a panic. That's what he's trying to say. If the documents concerning Egypt are true, it could upend America's relationship with one of its closest allies in the Middle East and North Africa. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with el-Sisi in late January in Cairo, where Blinken expressed the United States' solidarity with Egypt as it contends with the economic impact of Russia's brutal war in Ukraine, according to the State Department. President Biden also traveled to Egypt last November and met with al-Sisi and commended the Egyptian president for his country's stance on the war. In the face of Russia's war in Ukraine, Egypt has spoken up strongly at the United Nations, and that is appreciated very much as well, Biden said at the time. One of the documents, which is dated February 17th, says El Sisi instructed his senior military officials to supply Russia with rockets, artillery rounds, and gunpowder, but to keep the plan secret in order to avoid problems with the West, according to the Washington Post. An official identified by the newspaper as Mohammed Salah al-Din, the Minister of State for Military Production, told the Egyptian president that he would, quote, order his people to work shift work if necessary because it was the least Egypt could do to repay Russia for unspecified help earlier, end quote. The nature of that help is unclear. Egypt increased its reliance on Russian wheat last year amid disruptions to the global market stemming from Russia's war in Ukraine, according to data reviewed by Reuters. The Egyptian embassy in the U.S. did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Monday. A Pentagon spokesman was quoted as saying during a press briefing Monday by the Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, Chris Meagher, who said that an interagency task force is reviewing the leaks and the Justice Department has opened up a criminal probe. Now, some of this is going to sound like old news because you know what happened this week with the leaker, so I apologize, but we're playing catch up right now. Russia, meanwhile, has turned to North Korea, Iran, and some other U.S. adversaries to replenish its supply of weapons amid the war. Kirby, the White House national security spokesman, said last month that Russia is trading food to North Korea in exchange for much-needed weapons. Bullets for beans. That's the name of the game with Russia dealing with North Korea. Natto beans are kind of gross. Moving on. I'm going to show you some pretty cool fighter jets as soon as I take a sip of water. Okay, here we go. Those may look familiar to you, but the flags might not. Denmark's acting defense minister on Tuesday said he expects Copenhagen and its NATO allies will reach a decision on sending warplanes to Ukraine, quote, before the summer, as concerns mount over Kyiv's air defense capabilities amid the classified U.S. document leak. The Pentagon is still scrambling to locate the source of the leaked documents that paint a grim picture of Ukraine's air defenses and suggest that they could be depleted by next month. Officials have yet to authenticate the validity of the documents, and it is unclear when exactly they were leaked, though some reporting has suggested images of the documents were first posted online a month ago before they became widely known last week. Despite the renewed focus on Ukraine's air defenses, Western officials have been seriously considering sending combat aircraft to Ukraine for weeks. Poland and Slovakia also broke away from top NATO players like the U.S. and said last month that they would send Kyiv Soviet-era MiG-29 fighter jets. The U.S. has remained steadfast in its public refusal to send combat aircraft to Ukraine, though Washington has capitulated several times on defensive aid to Kyiv since the war began, including earlier this year when it eventually agreed to supply Ukraine with main battle tanks. Denmark will not do this alone. Acting Danish Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen told several outlets Tuesday, before adding that a decision would be reached in the near future. We need to do this together with several countries. We will also have a dialogue with Americans about this, he added. Sidebar here, they're all saying the same thing. Well, we'd like to do it, but we don't want to do it by ourselves, because if we did it alone, then Russia would have a reason to hate us. We will wait for everyone to agree, and then everyone will push in supplies at once, and then the Russians will realize that they can't win this war because there's a coalition of allies working against it. That's kind of the idea here. Everyone's sort of reluctantly being careful about who commits first. That's what that is. Despite pleas from Kyiv since the onslaught of the war, no modern aircraft has yet been pledged to Ukraine, though Britain in February offered to train Ukrainian pilots on combat aircraft. According to the French news outlet Le Figaro, Denmark has more than 40 American F-16s, 30 of which are currently active, as is in that picture. Copenhagen is looking to replace its fleet with 27 U.S. F-35s, which could enable it to provide Kyiv with the modern aircraft it desperately seeks. This is the backfill game all over again. Ukraine has some 85 fighter jets, compared to Russia's estimated 485. And, according to documents leaked last week, this precarious imbalance of air power could become more dire as Ukraine is allegedly predicted to run out of ammunition for its S-300 air defense systems by early May. These missile systems reportedly make up 89% of Ukraine's air defense capabilities, though the Pentagon has not confirmed these predictions, and Kyiv has accused Russian operatives of falsifying and leaking the documents to discredit counteroffensive ideas and turn Western support away from Ukraine. That said 307 planes and 293 helicopters just now at the scroller. And yet there's still 485 more in the Russian inventory, at least according to most of the stories I have. Moving on. I'm running out of stories already pretty quickly, so this is going fairly well, actually. Here you go. Russia may have lost as many as 1.3 million young workers since the start of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, according to a new report. The Finexpertiza consulting firm released its findings after analyzing official statistics, reporting that working citizens under the age of 35 in Russia fell by 1.33 million people between December 2021 and December 2022, marking the lowest share since the start of data collection in 2006. Young workers make up only 21.5 million of the total 72.1 million workforce, a startling figure when Russia has also reported a record low unemployment rate. The Moscow Times suggested that the lower participation could have resulted either from more young workers taking gray economy or under-the-table jobs from last year's mass exodus following the announcement of a partial mobilization to Ukraine. The, quote, partial mobilization looked to compel citizens to join the fight in Ukraine after major losses forced Putin to try to rebuild his forces in short order, but men began to leave the country in huge numbers in order to avoid the draft. Does that sound like 16,000 deaths in 415 days would motivate them for this? Or 180,000 plus, like what you see in the scroller? Just a thought. Only 2020, the start of the coronavirus pandemic and lockdown measures, saw a bigger drop in the job market, with 1.34 million young Russians dropping out. The biggest decrease in the current cut came from the age group of 25 to 29, which dropped by around 724,000 people. The next oldest group, 30 to 34, dropped by over 500,000 and comprised the biggest portion of the young worker bloc with 10.7 million. This development exposes Putin's lack of strategic planning and forward-looking approach to Russia's economic development, says Rebecca Koffler. Again, you know her credentials, I'm not going to repeat them all. The sizable loss of young workers will almost certainly have a profound negative impact on the Russian economy in the long term, she added. This development will likely jeopardize Putin's ambitious agenda for Russia in the field of advanced technologies, including the artificial intelligence and machine learning. If you don't have sufficient numbers of young people in the workforce, you cannot drive innovation or even make notable progress. The drop in young workers was offset by an increase of older workers, with workers aged 60 to 69 bumping up by over 336,000 people. Another 202,000 people from the age group of 50 to 54 also helped offset the losses. My question is, did they willingly go, or were they forced at gunpoint to go back to work? Because if you're 60 to 69 in Russia, where the majority of your life was eating rotten turnips, I know that's an old cliche. Would you want to go back to work? Nah, probably not. Moving on. Day 413, April 12th, Wednesday. And this story's titled Leaks. Look at that. Look at that guy's face. John Kirby, always wondering, was that really a fart just now? Or do I need to change my rubber underwear? Oh, how the mighty have fallen Admiral Kirby to be the White House whipping boy. I hope it was worth it. Foreign policy seems to be a depressing mess these days. China has again blockaded Taiwan in a military exercise designed to intimidate not just the democratic country, but Western powers as well. The supposed cause was Kevin McCarthy meeting with the Taiwanese president. And while the U.S. has pledged to defend Taiwan, it's hard not to wonder what would happen if American troops were sent to a group of islands just off of China's coast. Oh, you mean like Japan and Okinawa, for starters? The Biden team tried to bury a report before Easter weekend that it should have begun the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan much sooner. Administration officials inexplicably denied that the exit was chaotic, but one thing we know is that it was deadly, with 13 U.S. servicemen members killed by a deadly bomb. And now the American intelligence floating around social media raises a series of alarms, including how it got there, that we're just beginning to grasp. The intel paints a much darker picture of Ukraine's ability to fight off the Russians. This directly contradicts the president's reassurances that the war is going well. Which brings to mind the phrase credibility gap, popularized during the Vietnam War. I know a lot of you aren't old enough to know that. I'm not either, but I'm a very quick study. With LBJ, Robert McNamara, and General William Westmoreland reassuring the press and public that the war was going well, it was all the more shocking to learn that the Jungle War was an absolute disaster. Their light at the end of the tunnel rhetoric was a pack of lies, as was clear not just from the Pentagon Papers, but from the desperate U.S. evacuation of Saigon in 1975. Sidebar, my dad served in Vietnam from 62 to 1975. The entire damn war. The leaked intel documents revealed, as the Washington Post put it, Ukraine's challenges in amassing troops, ammunition, and equipment could cause its military to fall, well short of Kyiv's original goals for an anticipated counteroffensive aimed at retaking Russian-occupied areas this spring. This shines a light on Washington's misgivings about the state of the war. Even more worrisome, Volodymyr Zelensky could soon run out of ammunition for his anti-missile systems, which date to the Soviet era. How is this possible with all the weaponry the U.S. and NATO countries have provided? Or is it just too hard to keep up with the Russian military machine? Ukraine wants to cut off the Kremlin's access to Crimea, which was illegally annexed back in 2014, but its deficiencies in training and weapons probably will strain progress and exacerbate casualties during the offensive. Fortunately, the leaked intel also says that Russia suffers from bad morale and poorly equipped soldiers. What's grabbing headlines now is the revelation that the U.S. spied on Ukraine, South Korea, and Israel, as well as its other adversaries. This should come as a shock to nobody, as word has dribbled out over the years that even friendly countries spy on each other. A source close to Zelensky told CNN that Ukraine has changed some of its military plans because of the documents becoming public. As for the origins of the leak, the New York Times reports a surprisingly large number of people potentially had access to the Pentagon intelligence documents. We're talking about hundreds of people. That sounds like an abject failure, since these are among the nation's most sensitive military secrets. We don't know who's behind this. We don't know what the motive is, National Security spokesman John Kirby told reporters. That's why he has that look on his face, by the way. Kirby also said that the leaked material has no business, if you don't mind me saying, on the front pages of newspapers or on television. It is not intended for public consumption, and it should not be out there. That horse, she's already out of the barn. With major news outlets carrying a series of stories about the documents, they first popped up last month on social media site Discord, which is what I'm using right now, which is what I am a beta tester and developer for right now, and went unnoticed for a while. Discord says it is cooperating with the DOJ leak investigation. Can confirm. In the old days, a few short years ago, leakers would give secret material to one or more news organizations. Those outlets would have to weigh whether some of the material would jeopardize American soldiers or operatives, and often that there would be conversations with the White House. What's more, people could hold a news outlet responsible for its decisions. But now, top secret information just oozes out on social media. No one is responsible, and everyone is responsible. That's the unsettling world we currently live in. If you didn't know, that was kind of an opinion piece, but I thought it was an interesting one. That's why I shared it with you. Moving on. Let me try to give you a number of stories I have left. 4. Since it appears that we're not doing the War Game Phase 4 tonight, I have 4 stories for you, which means I will get you out of here in less than 2 hours. Imagine that. So, let's go to here. Russian lawmakers on Tuesday took steps to make it harder. By the way, Tuesday was a huge news day, if you weren't aware, if it wasn't obvious by now. Russian lawmakers on Tuesday took steps to make it harder for citizens to dodge future military draft orders in a move to circumvent the chaos that unfolded last September when President Vladimir Putin mobilized men for the war in Ukraine. The Kremlin's Duma, the lower house in its parliament, passed a series of measures, including a travel ban and an electronic monitoring system, to stop men fleeing the country should Moscow once again issue another draft, reported the New York Times. The legislation still needs to pass through the upper chamber, though the measures are expected to be pushed through with few, if any, changes before Putin signs it into law. The step suggests Putin may be looking to issue another mobilization order, as reports have suggested Ukraine is preparing to launch a spring offensive. Putin's last partial mobilization called up some 300,000 men to the front lines of Ukraine, which prompted an immediate exodus of tens of thousands of fighting-age men, with some reports suggesting that as many as 700,000 Russians had fled Russia's borders. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov reportedly said Tuesday that there were no plans for another mobilization order, but that the measures were needed to update Russia's conscription system. One of the updates includes the implementation of an electronic delivery system, which means that fighting-age men could receive their summons via email or social media. But not only could Russians be called to the front lines through their inbox, the order would be considered officially received 7 days after it had been sent, no matter whether the email had even been opened or if the individual has registered through the government website. If the individual then fails to report for duty within 20 days of their summons, punishments would begin to occur, such as the suspension of their driver's license or the inability to receive a bank loan or register real estate. Sidebar. Who are you fucking kidding? It's Russia. You don't come in, we're gonna kill you. Have you ever seen the movie The Death of Stalin with Jeffrey Tambor? You will see a hyperbole of cynical and probably historically accurate humor. Dark humor. You should watch it. It's worth your time. These electronic measures are meant to block previous methods of dodging the draft, like failing to receive their call-up notice, which formerly required their signature, a method that could be done by not registering with the proper government channels or failing to update an old address. Electronic draft. That's what they're talking about. Moving on. We have made it to Thursday. Yesterday. My birthday. Day 414. The day I went Magnum. It's a joke. I'm sorry if it's getting old. I just thought it was funny because one of my lady friends very, very funnily said, "You may not be special, but at least you made it to Magnum." Thought it was funny. Anyway, here you go. Oops. Hang on a sec. There you go. Neighbors Romania, Ukraine, and Moldova signed cooperation agreements in Romania's capital Thursday after a trilateral meeting on ways to strengthen security in their Black Sea region to counter threats posed by Russian aggression. The Black Sea Security Conference in Bucharest brought together the three countries' foreign and defense ministers, government officials, and international partners. The aim was to address the wide-ranging impact that Moscow's war in Ukraine is having on the region. NATO member Romania's Foreign Minister Bogdan Orescu called Russia, quote, the most direct and serious threat to the Black Sea region and the Western Alliance, and said war-torn Ukraine and embattled Moldova are essential to our future European security. Remember, Moldova is the poorest country in Europe. Moldova allowed the Russians to amass their forces on the southwestern border of Ukraine because Moldova couldn't stop them because they're poor. And they simply said, look, you can put your stupid troops here, just don't break our dishes because they're the only ones we've got. I say that as a joke, but when you're as a country as poor as they are, that could have very seriously been the actual thing they said to the Russians. Don't break the China, it's all we've got. Just do what you gotta do and get the hell out of our country. True story. Anyway, instead of peace and stability, the Black Sea region must become the priority target of the Russian aggression, he said, adding that a strong NATO presence there is, quote, a must. After signing the agreements, which aim to boost political, economic, and security cooperation between three nations, Orescu said that it records the fact that we have similar vision. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, who spoke to the Bucharest gathering by video link, called the war a bleeding wound in the middle of Europe and said that a security network for countries in the region that, quote, feel threatened by the maniac on the loose must be sought. It's time to turn the Black Sea into what the Baltic Sea has become, a sea of NATO, Kuleba said, referring to Finland's recent admission to the NATO military alliance. He also called for a resolute step forward on the path to Ukraine's own NATO membership, a move that Western officials are wary of committing to. After signing the trilateral declaration Thursday, Moldova's foreign minister Nicu Popescu said that Moldova remains the target of hybrid attempts to destabilize our country, and that the impact of Moscow's war is being felt by every citizen of non-NATO Moldova. Moldova, which has faced a long series of crises over the past year, including alleged Russia-backed destabilization plots, was granted European Union candidate status last June, the same as Ukraine. The same day as Ukraine, actually. As well as addressing security issues, the Black Sea Security Conference held on April 12th and 13th discussed topics including freedom of trade and the facilitation of energy transport routes. Officials also discussed the importance of countering Russia's cyber warfare efforts. Romania's Arescu said Moscow is, quote, orchestrating attacks against the region and against European and allied states. You don't say! Anyway, moving on. 2 to go. This was that story that I was asking you guys about in the intro. Do you remember once upon a time, Poland announced that it was willing to give up all of its MiG-29s to Ukraine if the United States was willing to sell them F-15s. Think about that. We will give our neighbor our warfighters, our MiG-29 fleet. We will give them to you, signed, sealed, and delivered, as long as the United States is willing to sell us replacement planes. We're giving these away, and we will buy the replacements. That was the deal. That was the original deal. We covered that way back when. Like, at the beginning of the war room. What happened? How did that deal go down? Sounded great, right? Ukraine was like, hey, we're going to get like 20-something MiG-29s from Poland. Poland's going to get to buy F-15 EX models, the export models, and the United States military industrial complex gets to spin up a bit to build the thing that they're selling to Poland. Everyone wins, right? And what happened? Well, Poland, you're going to have to take the jets to Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany to facilitate the deal, and then the Ukrainians can come to Ramstein, and then they can pick up the planes and fly them back to Ukraine. And that whole deal turned into one giant shitty clusterfuck, didn't it? And what ended up happening? Everyone walked away from the deal. Ukraine didn't get shit. And we looked like idiots. Fast forward to this week, actually, and you have this story. Germany has approved Poland's request to export five MiG-29 fighter jets to bolster Ukraine's air power against the Russian invasion, the German Defense Ministry said on Thursday. Poland's Defense Ministry did not immediately comment. The German Defense Minister, Boris Pistorius, said that the request had arrived Thursday and that Berlin's same-day approval showed that Germany could be relied upon. But they couldn't be last year. Germany inherited 24 MiG-29 jets from the East German GDR during reunification in 1990. At the same time, the aircraft were seen as among the most advanced fighter jets in the world. In 2004, Berlin passed on 22 aircraft to Poland. Of the remaining 2 jets, one was destroyed in a crash, and the other one is on show at a museum. Poland needs Berlin's consent to send its remaining jets to a third country. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that during a visit to Warsaw last week that Poland would help form a coalition of Western powers to supply warplanes to Kyiv. Ukraine, which hopes to launch a counteroffensive in the coming weeks or months, wants to secure fighter jets to defend against airstrikes. Western countries have so far been reluctant to send advanced fighter jets, such as F-16s, to Kyiv, but some countries have stepped in to send old MiG-29 jets that Ukraine already uses. There's an advantage to this. If you send them the thing that they're already used to using, there's no retraining lag. That's pretty smart. If you took something that one would consider outdated and you made it legendary because you pushed it to the limit, that's not a bad thing. Where have we heard that before? Oh, I don't know. The U.S. Army puts things into practice, but the U.S. Marine Corps takes the equipment and makes it legendary. Sound familiar? It should sound familiar. Moving on. See? Quick story, huh? And I believe this is the last one I have for you for the day. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, remember him? The Admiral, retired, has revealed on Wednesday that there is a small U.S. military presence at the American Embassy in Ukraine. Kirby was asked about leaked Pentagon documents suggesting that there are U.S. Special Forces operating inside the war-torn country. I won't talk to the specifics of numbers and that kind of thing, but to get to your exact question, there is a small U.S. military presence at the embassy in conjunction with the Defense Attaché's office to help us work on accountability of the materiel that is going on in and out of Ukraine, Kirby said, referencing the weapons and other support the U.S. has been sending to Kyiv. So they're attached to that embassy and to the defense attaché. Kirby, who was speaking on the sidelines of President Biden's trip to Northern Ireland, added that these troops are, quote, not fighting on the battlefield. In addition, he also said that the U.S. forces in Kyiv also provide security services. So what's it going to be? Are you providing security services, or are you not fighting on the battlefield? Because you can't really do both, since the whole country is a battlefield. Anyway, there has been no change to the president's mandate, and there will not be American troops in Ukraine fighting in this war, Kirby lied. The Pentagon in November confirmed that the U.S. forces were on the ground to inspect American military aid deliveries in Ukraine. Sidebar, if you're going to inspect the aid deliveries, you're probably also going to get the people who receive them boned up on how they work. Maybe even shoving them aside, going, look, just get out of the way. Let me just do it for you. At least, that's what people like me do. Get frustrated, shove them aside, and go, listen, Junior, just watch me do it. Maybe you'll figure it out through osmosis. Speaking about the U.S.'s interactions with allies in the wake of the leaks, Kirby added, we are not making overt attempts to reach out to the relevant allies and partners to explain to them, as best we know, what we know. And we don't know a lot right now, but to make sure that they understand we're taking this very, very seriously, that we've got a criminal investigation going on, as well as a review across the Department of Defense to look at the national security implications and, of course, where we're listening to their questions and their concerns and doing the best we can to answer them at this point. Kirby also said, we don't know what else this individual or individuals might have and might still release. Now, some of you know it's nothing because he got arrested today. Anyway, or yesterday, I think it was. I won't talk about the content in some of these leaked documents. I think you can understand that we have to do what we need to do to protect our national security, he added. Clearly, this is a breach of our ability to protect some information, and that's why we're taking it so seriously. On Tuesday, it was reported that the leak of dozens of U.S. documents containing, in some cases, what the Department of Defense is describing as sensitive and highly classified material may have come from outside the Pentagon, based on conversations with a variety of American defense and intelligence officials. So, since I won't be doing the war scenario tonight, let me fill in the blanks a little bit. A 21-year-old Air Force reservist who was doing military intelligence analyzing was given the highest level of security clearance this country has to offer. The Yankee Marshal wasn't given that level of security clearance. Military Arms Channel Mac, Tim, was not given this level of security clearance. Just a thought. This 21-year-old, some might say zit farm, whatever, he was given this clearance because he was given the task of giving his interpretive opinion on what he was shown. And at first, on the Discord this week, we discussed this and we thought, well, what could he possibly give in terms of insight? And at first, I was really hesitant to accept this, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I'm like, maybe they wanted a young man's perspective because of the way it was presented, or the way that it was published, or the way that it was acquired. Like, you could actually gain intelligence through something as stupid as memes if you read between the lines, right? Maybe that's why they grabbed this guy. And they were like, hey, you're young, you're sort of in the know. What do you think of this? And they had to give him the clearance to show him this, right? And then he said, well, looks like this. Or if it were me, I'd think that it means this. So I'm not saying that a 21-year-old is not capable of handling the responsibility of national secrets. Far from it. Because obviously in this case, they must have thought it was important to ask him. It's what he did with that information. That's where I have a problem. Because the way he interpreted what he saw and then turned around and decided the world needs to see this, it's bullshit that we're hiding this from our people since they're footing the bill for it. I have a problem with the way he did it. Some of you may have seen the movie Green Zone. You've heard me reference it since the beginning of the show. Green Zone, Matt Damon finds out about why Iraq was a cluster screw. And at the end, after doing a bit of intel work and realizing that the government was part of the problem, instead of trying to fight the system, he just took all that information and he emailed it to everybody in the media to make the biggest expose that he could. That is how you present something you think is unjust. He didn't do that. This kid, no. This guy was 21 years old. He was given the keys to the castle. He didn't like what he saw. And instead of sharing it with people in the media that would actually put it out there in a meaningful way, that would make the country go, what the fuck? And start questioning our leaders? No, he didn't do that. What he did is he jumped on a Discord server, similar to mine, right? But probably his. And it was full of a bunch of what I call squeakers. Young people, very young people, impressionable young people. The kind of people who follow memes and are not of sound mind to the point where they don't know who or what they really are yet. And they idolized this guy because it was like, oh my god, this guy's older than us. Oh my god, this guy has security clearance. Oh my god, this guy's bucking the trend and he's sharing this with us. Like, they were young people. They were very impressionable. This guy was their god because he knew so much. He showed it off to them. Not the world, just his fan base. And then it somehow got out. That's my problem with this. You could have made a difference that meant something. Instead, you were trying to show off to your fans. I hope they throw the book at you. I really do. I hope they put you in the darkest, shittiest part of Gitmo until your legs rot off. Because that's what you do to traitors. What we used to do was hang you. Anyway, I was really hoping to share with you the war game scenario this week because I really put a lot of thought into this. And I think what ended up happening is I set a stipulation this week saying that I would go last because I wanted all the panelists to go first so they couldn't just piggyback off my idea. And as you can see, none of them showed up, which means they couldn't be bothered to come up with their own thought. And that's sad because I really was hoping that they could share their thoughts with you like I do every week. But they're not here. So you have my apologies as a presenter because I had a great one for you. I really did. I really did. Let me just tell you how the war game should have worked, okay? I don't want to leave you hanging because then you're probably going to wonder why I'm actually kind of pissed off about this. Phase 4 of the war game was supposed to go down like this. The theme of the show was about the leak, and I sort of beat around the bush until the very end of my little diatribe because I wanted to play it into the scenario this week. Phase 4 of the war game was U.S. Special Forces have been confirmed to be in the Ukraine, as you heard me say. What will you have them do? Where? And what are your predictions for the after effects of their operation? I left this one blown wide open so you can be as creative as you like, but try to keep it feasible. Also, try to keep it as detailed as possible. If they're doing a certain type of operation, how would they gear up? What time of day or night would it be? What region would you have them operate in? What time frame for ingress and exfil, insert and extraction, etc.? What would you get to be the war planner for this operation? I gave you the chessboard, the nation of Ukraine, and I gave you the puzzle or the pieces, the U.S. Special Forces. What would you have them do? That was this week's war game. Nobody showed up for it. I've got a good one. I'd love to share it with you, but what's the point? Because I ain't got nobody else to bounce it off of. I mean, let me put it to you this way. I gave it an operation name. I explained the details of the operation and what its goals were. I picked out where they were going, how they were going to get there, what they were going to be equipped with, how much time they had to get in, do what they had to do, and get out, what I thought the after effects and aftershocks of that operation would be, and, you know, who the casualty list would be. But, alas, it'll have to wait. We may come back to this next week after I hear the multitude of excuses of why no one showed up. Or maybe this will be the last episode. I don't know. So, after all that, I'm going to play this. Because it has been an hour, 23, and 54 seconds. I managed to do it. I got you in and here and out of here in less than 2 hours. This was the War Room. This was day 415. Chances are we'll be back. I'll be back at least, maybe. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a regular here, welcome back. Either way, check out my other playlists and see if my other interests may be of interest to you. I have been stagnant in the number of subs and subscribers gained and lost in the last 2 weeks. I suspect it's because I'm not recording gun content right now. I promise I'll work on it. So until then, Slava Ukraini, and good night.